First of all, I'd like to once again thank the organizers for organizing this conference. And I've heard, I did not attend the last one, but what I heard is that this conference looks much bigger than what it was for the past few events before. It gives me a really good positive vibe that I think Taiwan as a whole is on the cusp of something happening big in geothermal. You all have done small strides. A few megawatts have been installed already. But what I'm looking forward to, based on what I see here in terms of the attendees, both from the private sector, the government, investment, that Taiwan is looking at something much bigger than what we planned. And yesterday when I was talking, we told about a 1.2 gigawatt in 2030. And always a question is asked, is it achievable? I think with what we have in plans, and also with a very stepwise approach, learning from things that others have done and have failed and have improved on, plus the technology that we have available now. And that's what I'll be sort of discussing today, to give you a small insight of what we can see in the current scenarios rather than what we have done in the past. Especially in the past, if you see globally, wherever geothermal has been installed, right from my hometown in New Zealand, where we started back in 1958. In US, it's been a little bit older than that. Go to Italy, it's been 1900s. The rate of change has been quite slow, gradual, I would say. But I can say one of the countries was Kenya, which from 1990 onwards, we were at a very slow pace. And from about 2000 onwards to about 2025 as we speak, we've grown from almost 100 megawatt being produced to about 1,000 megawatts. So that's almost a 10-fold increase. Those have been done with challenges that we had, especially, for example, in Kenya, where we did not have much of oil and gas expertise. Now, when I try that to Taiwan, yes, you all have got some expertise in oil and gas and other things that you have done in the past, but we sit in a region which is of prime focus to be thought about. The prime focus being places like Malaysia, Indonesia, and other places where oil has been done pretty well. I think we can take learning steps from them in terms of equipment and technology. Now, let me focus now on to my topic, what is, how do we pick a spot? I'm sure there are many geologists in the room over here, may not agree with me totally, but I look at it from an aspect where how can we make our choices more precise, avoid drilling dry holes. Yes, we do come across dry holes, but that may not be the end of it, especially when we talk of EGS and AGS. Why do I say that? You know, we used to have holes that would be dry in a hydrothermal environment. But, for example, everybody talks of EVER or FERBO. Some of the projects that were done at FERBO, one of the first projects in Nevada, I had drilled those wells back in 2010 for an hydrothermal resource. And what happened there is, we were drilling those wells and we did not get what we expected in terms of the megawatt output. But now you see, about a decade later or 2 decades later, those same wells are being now looked at from a very different goal of, yes, there is heat, there may be less fluid or steam movement, but the heat that was there has been utilized by FERBO, and now they're generating power from that. So everything is not dark and gloomy. You have a sweet spot over there. Now, y'all can read this later, it's just a disclaimer, I have to put it on. Now, my topics today, I would like to focus on a few things. One is conventional geothermal resources. How do we look at those? Then you see, now we've got the two other new terms that have been coined: enhanced geothermal systems and advanced geothermal systems. The third thing is large-scale screening methods. Fourth, what are the tools that we have currently in our toolbox? And I'm sure some of you who are listening to me may be developing your own tools. I'm certainly sure that those tools, like NREL has been doing that back in the US, in the National Labs space, what they're looking at is developing new tools. The reason being, can we, rather than playing a lottery game, can we make our choice of a drill site more viable? And last of all, how do we improve our success ratio? I just focus on that last thing before I forget. Why is success ratio so important? When we drill these type of wells, for example, yesterday you will have heard a conventional geothermal well down to a depth of about 2,500 meters is anywhere in the range of about $6 million per well. There may be people who may say that, Sam, we can do it faster or cheaper. I've drilled myself wells for the last 3 decades. Doing faster and cheaper is a way to spread it out, the cost. But, as I said, everybody can drill a hole in the ground. But drilling a well in the ground is a totally different story. So now, when you talk of improving success ratio, some of these wells, you are spending $6 million per well. And nowadays we are talking of, in EGS projects, you're talking of doublets. So you've got to drill 2 wells almost to the same depth, directional. So that takes a lot more of cost and you're targeting. When you talk of your success ratio improvement, you look at $12 million being spent on a well. What do you want to be the final outcome? I do not want to drill a dry hole or not achieve what I wanted. So here comes the challenge. How can I improve my success ratio in order to make my $12 to $15 million well spent? Number one. Number two is spending the cost on, one is drilling that well. The second part of it is, how do we get what we need, what we are looking for? In terms of geothermal, we are mainly looking for heat. And some of the hydrothermal prospects, even in Taiwan that we have, we are looking for a resource also in terms of either steam or hot water. So some of you all might have seen this drawing, this slide yesterday, but I'll talk of it from a different aspect today. If you go from this side, from your left side to the right, you first see on the left side, you see the supercritical. This has been done in the past. What have they done here is you are actually drilling into a resource itself. And if you want to talk of drilling into lava, that's one of the most challenging things that you have done. We've drilled in the world so far, we have drilled into lava in 3 places. One is Hawaii, one is Iceland, and one is Kenya. And I've had the privilege of working in all 3 places. Especially in Hawaii, Gad is here, he speaks about ORMAT. That's where we drill into, we actually drill those wells in Hawaii about 11 kilometers crow flying distance from the Kilauea volcano. And recently, in the past about 3 years back, we had a volcanic eruption that actually came very close to our plants in Hawaii. That's where you are drilling into supercritical fluids, magma coming to surface. Now, how do you control that? That's number one. And number two is, how can we use that supercritical steam to generate better efficiency in terms of steam? That's got its own challenges. One of the challenges, that brine. It's a very corrosive brine, number one. Number two is the heat. What happens with heat? Your metallurgy gets affected quite a bit. In terms of drilling, I would say, you actually have expansion and cooling. So that's something to be thought about. The second one is what we talk of the normal geothermal wells where we are not drilling into supercritical steam, but yet we are looking for a resource that has got steam or hot water, and how can we bring that to surface? Those two, we know that there has to be permeability, and sometimes when we talk of permeability, as a geologist, you may say, what do you mean by permeability? Oil and gas, we used to talk of porosity. Geothermal, don't even talk of permeability. I am talking of fractures, and some of the lava tubes are so big, like you can come to Hawaii, you can see, you can actually walk through those lava tubes. That's your resource that you're looking into. Now come to the third one, EGS. Now EGS, the new term that's been coined, what we are looking for there is heat, but we may or may not have the hot water or the steam that drives it. Then you come to AGS, where you're almost replicating that system but in a closed loop. So that there, your well, your fluid that's inside the closed loop is not going to be in contact with any other fluid outside. And the last of all, on the extreme right, you see direct use projects. Now, many a times in different countries, you may not have the super hot or the high temperature fluids, but you may have fluids that are about, say, 100 degrees centigrade. Can we make any use of that? Yeah. Yes. And those are going to be very critical because, say, in some of the countries that I visit, say, like work in Dominica, in the Caribbean islands, once we went and we saw that, or in Kenya, where heat is used, the carbon dioxide is sent across to the rose-growing greenhouses, and the hot water is used to keep the temperature regulated. Same thing happens in Iceland. So again, if you've got a temperature of a resource that is not over 100 degrees or 150, yet you can use them very viably. Now, to focus on my talk was, what are the exploration tools that we currently have that we can look forward to using for these type of methods? First of all, when we try to look at, from a Halliburton perspective, when we look at these type of projects, we first try to delineate, say if you think of Taiwan as a country itself, we look at the island of Taiwan as a whole. We get a lot of data from satellites that pass over you. Every day there are satellites moving across and they are gathering data. For example, what are the data that they gather? They give you shallow heat temperatures, or across, as it flies over Taiwan, it will be gathering data on which are the areas that have a higher temperature gradient than other places. For example, number one. Number two, it would look at alteration mineralogy. Number three, it would look at stress and strain of faults that can be probably mapped. And looking at those, we are trying to delineate from the whole island of Taiwan to a few specific hotspots. So once we do that, then we go into details on choosing out of the hotspots. Now, why is this very important? This is quite important because if you were to drill, if somebody was to tell me, Sam, come and look for the best spots in Taiwan, and they tell me, Sam, go and drill all along the island of Taiwan and see which is the best spot. It's going to be economically not feasible, number one. Number two, is going to be a large scale, extended period of time where you would have to do that. Now, to reduce that time effect, that time and the cost, what you're trying to do is use existing data, average, and also imagery, satellite image and other things to cut down that time and the cost. Once we have done that, then we also look at wells that may have been drilled. So when you look at wells that have been drilled in Taiwan, it could have been done for oil and gas. So what we do, for example here, we take that data and also put that into the model. Finally, what are we looking at? We try to come up with a conceptual model. This model gives us a basic idea of what is subsurface. That's where the geologists, like those who are listening to me, like to tell me, Sam, this is where I want you to drill. So keep that in mind. Now, Once we do that, then we go into this workflow. So what you look at is, you look at the 3 Gs, geology, geochemistry, geophysics. Then you look at any petrophysical. So what happens there, after you're done all your satellite imagery data gathering, finally you have to get some boots on the ground. You go and sample springs. You go and look at geology that is there. Based on that, you come up with what does it look like subsurface. So that's where we come up with the conceptual model. Once we do the conceptual model, here comes some important things. We look at analogs of the same type in different parts of the world. Can we use those to, again, look at our criteria to make those changes? Then we look at how do we develop this resource. Because keep in mind, yesterday we did speak about this. Geothermal resources, when you sign a PPA, you're signing a PPA for 20 to 30 years. So this resource has to be managed properly. And last of all, the risk analysis. We spoke yesterday widely from different audience we heard, speakers we heard this. The risk that is there, how do we mitigate the risk and minimize it? Once we can minimize the risk, that helps us to get our deliverables better. And that also helps with the last thing here is well engineering. What Halliburton, we've got a team called Neftex, which does all the initial data. Then comes our landmark team, which does both well engineering, well placement, and execution of these wells. Now, here is a quick screenshot. I won't go too much detail because I mentioned about this. You all can have a look at this when you get chance. And if you all have any questions, please reach back. I'm just giving you a small example of what we have done, for example, on looking at the sweet spots, helping the Neftex data to synthesize data, and then based on that, we look to identify areas. And once we have identified the areas, then we go on, how can we plan our wells much better. Before I close, how do we look at improving the chances of success in Taiwan? One is doing our subsurface data gathering the best we can. The more the data, the better it is. Second, prepare conceptual models. These conceptual models are based on analog data and other things. Then we do our screening. Once we have these models are continuously updated as we drill new wells. And finding the heat and well targeting. As I close, what does Halliburton brings to the table? We've got Neftex, we've got Landmark, we've got the execution teams to execute these wells and also help to improve our modeling and the chance of success. As I close, this is what you can see, and this collaboration of data is quite an important aspect of how we do our sweet spot selection. Thank you for your time and appreciate you all for listening. Thank you very much.